Going to explain to you the nature of sacrifice, highlighting the two very distinct types of sacrifice that exist. That there is irrational subjective sacrifice, where you are exchanging a higher value for a lower value, and then there is objective and rational sacrifice, where you're exchanging a lesser value for a higher value. A very quick example. The irrational sacrifice is giving up a $50 note for $5. For a $5 note. Well, that's ridiculous. That's irrational subjective. It's based upon values that are not actually objective and good for you, that don't support your proper survival. Whereas you have a rational sacrifice, you're giving away $50 to get $100. Or you're buying food and you value that food more than the $50 you're getting. So that's a rational sacrifice, because sacrifice, whatever side it's on, is an exchange of value. It's to lose something in gain of something else. But the irrational sacrifice is where you're losing more than you're gaining. The rational sacrifice, which mind you happens very rarely and most often in emergency situations. I mean, unless you want to label everything to do with trade as a rational sacrifice, which in a way you technically can, but that's not the way us humans use the word, because again, sacrifice is that exchange of value. Irrational is the higher value for the lesser value. Another example is Abraham in the Christianity story wanting to kill his son for the appeasement of the fictional character who was creating the world in that storybook. That is an irrational sacrifice, because his son is objectively a higher value than the favor of some entity that he'd never seen, never met, couldn't talk to, and that he just read in a fairy tale book. So that is an irrational sacrifice. It's because it's an exchange. He wanted to kill his sons in exchange for favor. So an exchange of a higher value, his son, for a lesser value, appeasing some fiction. And then you have that rational sacrifice, which could be losing a pawn in a chess game to be able to win the match. Or you're playing a computer game and you send in some troops and you want to win via attrition, which means you just keep flooding the enemy's base with cheap soldiers, so then you can eventually, when you're sacrificing them, it's a game, so we're using that term sacrifice. Could be in real life, this world, could be in a game of chess or the computer game. It could be you want to get onto the lifeboat scenario. There's only a capacity for 10 people and your family's on there. Let's say you love and you value all your family's lives, your partner, your parents and your children. Let's say you've got a big family, 10 kids, and you're like, well, no, I choose to die. I won't get onto the lifeboat. And so in that emergency situation, then that can be considered an objective and rational sacrifice, because you have a hierarchy of values and you do value your children and your family's life more than you. If that is who you are, and you do have a family you value higher, because some people might not. And so you can go into big debates there. But if that was the hierarchy of someone's values, then that would be considered a rational sacrifice, because that person values their family's life more than their own, so they would be exchanging their life, which is a lesser value, in exchange for the higher value of their family's life survival to get onto that lifeboat and to escape the Titanic. So they're the two sides. Rational and objective sacrifice of exchange of value for lesser for higher, and then irrational subjective sacrifice of the higher value for the lesser value. Abraham wanting to kill his son, Jesus killing himself on the cross, of the $50 for the $5 note, of getting one of those things, or wearing one of these things to protect other people. If you're just listening to me and you can't see what I did, I will describe my action. I put my hand over my shoulder and I moved my thumb in a clicky motion. And then the second thing I did was pick up, I can say that, I think, a mask, and you put it over your face. That is an irrational subjective sacrifice to exchange the quality of your oxygen intake for someone's psychotic delusion that you will be keeping them safe and healthy by restricting your air intake. That is just nonsensical, completely irrational and subjective. So what I'm going to be doing, I want to go over my chapter I've written here, which is part of my codex on objective philosophy. And this chapter is on the nature of sacrifice. And so it's very confusing, the concept of sacrifice, because most of the time people use it in a way to denote goodness. They think when they say that they've sacrificed for something, that it means that they are good. And so there's a lot of conceptual confusion there, and I hopefully want to unravel that all for you by the end of this video. Heads up, this might take an hour or so to get quite a thorough understanding, I think. I think you should have a pretty good understanding going over the abstract and then reducing it back down to more concretes of those specific examples. So reading from the chapter, and what I suggest as well, after you watch this video, go read this chapter for yourself. Ideally within a week. Do it soon, because that's just going to solidify your understanding. You're going to get a different experience. You will by reading this, and you'll get a much more thorough grasp. And because it's online, I can edit it as well as I go, because maybe I figure out a way to phrase something slightly more accurately, which helps things be more clear and bring more clarity to your mind. All right, I'm going to skip the intro part. So the common reasonable use of sacrifice. People think that there's reasonable when they're looking at the good side of sacrifice. Sometimes. Okay, well, just in ordinary language, sacrifice is often described as giving up one thing in order to gain something else that matters more. So they're viewing it in the rational, objective way. But then what happens is that then they conflate these negative, irrational sacrifices, and then they clump it together in this one concept. So you see what I did there? I broke apart the concept of sacrifice, and I said, okay, well, there's some good sacrifices over here, the rational ones, but there's also the bad sacrifices over here. You don't want to just put them all under this one conceptual category, this one label, this one word of sacrifice. Because then sometimes you'll be saying, well, I sacrificed my money today and I had some fantastic meals. I got a great protein ball, I had a coffee, had a smoothie, I had a sandwich, it's great. And you're like, oh, well, okay, they're rational sacrifices. But then you might then say again, you know what, I'm going to get married. It's like, what? But I thought you hated your girlfriend. You were just about to break up with her. Yeah, I know, but she really loves me. I don't want to be with her, but it's probably just best to make her happy. I really don't want to be with her, but my parents have been pressuring me. Oh, I'm just going to do it. Yeah, see, that's an irrational sacrifice, or following in your parents' footsteps because that's what they expect of you, to go to the same university or take over the business or pick a particular career path that doesn't suit you personally. That would be an irrational sacrifice. But people, they mix up the two, of the good sacrifices, the bad, they put it under that one word, and so it creates all this confusion. And that's what I'm doing, and I really enjoy doing, and I'm good at it too, at seeing, hold on, there's two distinct elements here, and then ripping that concept apart and then relabeling it, relabeling the different sides of it, because there are distinct sides. And remember, a concept is it's the mental representation of all the different units or instances or existence or references in reality. And so you can see one unit of irrational sacrifice is the following in your parents' footsteps when you don't want to. Another unit, right, that specifically fits into that concept, and then the word of irrational sacrifice is also getting married or staying in a relationship that you don't really want to be in because there's social expectation to be so. So that's another unit. So it's another example of the same type of thing happening, and that's why it fits into that concept of rational sacrifice. And then you have, that rational sacrifice, where you have to kill the pawns in your chess game, or my favorite game is Dawn of War. Dawn of War Soulstorm with the unification mod. That's the best. And so when you play those kinds of strategy games, you always have to sacrifice troops. That's just the way the game works. So that can be a valid concept in that domain. But for real life, again, if you're just labeling every single trade every time I go down to the supermarket and you're spending money, well, you know, this $50 note, it's worth $50, but that food I want, that's more valuable to me. So then, okay, you sacrifice the $50 in exchange, which is the lesser value, in exchange for that $50 worth of food, which is the higher value. You want it more. That's trade. I mean, technically, yes, you can call it a rational sacrifice. Most of the time we don't talk like that, and there's other cases which I'll give as we go through here. Back to this and reading. So here are some examples of people using the term sacrifice. They might say they're sacrificing free time to build a business. They're sacrificing wealth for freedom. Say me, I don't want to be very wealthy because I understand if I want to be very wealthy, I've got to spend a lot of my time. And I'd prefer to have a lot of time, but a little money. But some people, they'd prefer to have little free time, but a lot of money. Oh, that's okay, whatever works for you personally. Some people sacrifice comfort to gain strength. Going to the gym, you might be a bit uncomfortable. Oh, but really, is that uncomfort? I don't know, that's hard. Well, for some people it might be uncomfortable. I enjoy going to the gym where my back is not in pain. And that can be really good to gain strength and whatnot, but come back. All right, sacrificing a pawn to win a chess game. Or sacrificing an animal for the favor of a god. People use the concept of sacrifice in many of those different ways. And so in each case, sacrifice is given up, is giving something up in support of a goal. And when the outcome is positive, such as when it's to do with success or mastery or freedom, victory, favor, sacrifice is framed as intelligent, necessary, and even virtuous. At this level, sacrifice seems indistinguishable from good judgment. So sacrifice is heroism and moral ideal. So this is another way that the concept of sacrifice gets used. And if it's a little bit confusing in the beginning, that's to be expected. It takes quite a while for me to lay all the foundations and get the ideas and then to unravel them all over time, over the course of the video. So sacrifice is also celebrated in its most dramatic form, self-sacrifice. People love that. So examples are a soldier staying behind so others can escape, and most of the time you do see this in movies and TV shows. I think, again, in real life, it's going to be very rare that this happens. Of course, it will happen here and again, but most of our contact with the form of self-sacrifice as heroism is going to be from movies and TV shows. Another, maybe more real-world example is a parent jumping in front of a car to save their child. Someone entering a burning building knowing they may not come out. A brave fireman. A person giving up their life for a cause, a people, or a loved one. Gandhi or Donald Trump. He's not gone yet, is he? These acts are commonly described as noble, moral, the highest expression of goodness. Notice that. There is nothing more good than killing yourself to save other people in subjective morality. Pure unconditional love. This is pure unconditional love. Oh my goodness. I've spoken about that topic, about love, especially unconditional love, how that is incoherent, evil nonsense. It's ridiculous. But I won't go over that right now. If you are someone who supports unconditional love, yes, that will sound like a big statement, but I've got videos that back it up and really rip that to shreds, because love should be conditional, absolutely. Otherwise, your love is meaningless. It counts for nothing. Here, sacrifice is not merely tolerated, it is revered. Also, sacrifice as moral obligation. Sacrifice also functions socially as a kind of moral debt, obligation, or duty. People say, I sacrificed so much for you. You owe me. Look what I gave up. If you really cared, you'd sacrifice. It's for the greater good. Think about others. Don't be so selfish. You should sacrifice more. So in this form, which is relationships, like with intimate partners, that can happen in friendships and families and school and work and military and government and all sorts of different layers where sacrifice gets used as a conceptual weapon of moral obligation. Whether people knowingly use it like that or accidentally, it happens. In this form, sacrifice becomes a claim to moral authority, a tool of obligation, a means of control. It's a way of getting leverage and influence, power. It is often unclear whether the sacrifice was requested, whether it was necessary, whether it actually benefited anyone, yet its moral weight is assumed. There is also sacrifice as loss and suffering in a way that people actually understand. For example, taking a job one hates for slightly more money, entering a relationship with the wrong person to avoid loneliness, abandoning personal values for social acceptance, suppressing one's identity to fit in, losing one's dignity to conform to a group. If someone's lonely and they move somewhere new, they get invited out to dinner and everyone's drinking and there's peer pressure to drink and someone doesn't want to drink but then they feel obliged to drink to fit in because they don't want to be lonely, and then they compromise their integrity and their values just for a bit of company that doesn't even meet their own minimum standards. Here, sacrifice is still framed as necessary, but the tone shifts. Submission replaces pride. Weakness replaces virtue. Self-erosion replaces growth. Social expectations replace self-interest. Yet the same word sacrifice is used. Conceptual confusion. The term sacrifice gets used for too many things. It's not separated well enough. In the mainstream, that is. Until now. The emergency problem. And so it gets used in times of emergency too. A person jumps in front of a bullet to save someone they love. You know, if you really love someone, you'd sacrifice your life for them. This one is commonly known. And so in that situation, there is real loss, real pain, possibly death. And that does look like sacrifice. But then another question emerges. If the person values the other more than their own continued existence in that moment, is it still a sacrifice? Or is it a rational choice given their values? So now I'm just introducing a bit of thinking. And if the outcome is death, what good does this do for them? Can this action still be called self-interested? Or does it contradict egoism entirely? Because there's the mainstream version of sacrifice, and then you have objectivism with Ayn Rand's version of sacrifice, where she identified sacrifice as evil on all levels. And she was absolutely for rational self-interest, and so am I, of course. But what she didn't do as well as what I'm doing right now is clearly separating, while there is rational sacrifice and there is irrational sacrifice, but she identified all sacrifice as irrational. So she deliberately said that all sacrifice is the exchange of a higher value for a lesser value. That's a sacrifice. Of the $50 note for the $5 note. That's a sacrifice, a loss. But the thing is, when you look at the mainstream use of the word and how it most commonly gets used and how the word originated, sacrifice, when it began, I think it was primarily sacrificing animals for the favor of a god. And what those people did is they subjectively and irrationally believed that they were exchanging a lesser value for a higher value. Even if they were wrong, that's what their perception was. Because they believed in the favor of a god, they believed that was more important and valuable to them than the animal or the food they give away and they let rot. Or, for instance, there might be some kind of controversy in a tribe, and so therefore, instead of having the tribe descend into infighting and creating segregation and groups and tribal war, they would pick a scapegoat and they would sacrifice the scapegoat and they'd blame someone, and kind of like an Epstein, what happened recently in 2026 or 2025, whenever he was murdered, there's this leakage of, oh, the cabal's being exposed, so what we'll do is sacrifice one of our number to allow the masses to get angry about something and to say, oh, look, stuff's being done, something's happening. Oh, there's this list, so in that, from their perspective, that's a rational sacrifice. But at the end of the day, evil can't really do anything rational. But that's, evil can do lots of very intelligent things, but rational, well, no, because rational means an alignment. That's getting off topic. Let me stay focused here. Otherwise, this will go on for too long. So, but why I brought that up, because you've got Ayn Rand's perspective, where a lot of my philosophy comes from and I'm working to improve, and she said that all sacrifice was irrational. But, then I'm showing that there is rational sacrifice as well, and I've got quite a lot of examples. But then in the instance of dying for a loved one, jumping in front of a bullet, she would say, well, she wouldn't even consider that a rational sacrifice. If your partner was going to get shot and then you choose to jump in front of the bullet, most people would call that a sacrifice, and they would believe, as Ayn does, or I wouldn't say believe, but knows, it's an exchange of a lower value for a higher value. You value your partner's life more than your own in that particular situation. You're willing to die for them, and most people call that a sacrifice, but Ayn Rand wouldn't call that a sacrifice. She'd call that being in alignment with your values and your principles. And so she wouldn't call it a sacrifice. But then it's like, well, what do you actually call it? Because the fact is, there's still an exchange of value. There is still, and that's fundamentally what a sacrifice is. It's an exchange of value of one thing for something else. In a way, it's a specific type of trade. It's a trade of, if it's irrational, if it's irrational, higher value for a lower. If it's a rational sacrifice, it's an exchange of a lower value for a higher. And so that's why I would label this situation, for your own conceptual understanding, just to make it easier to classify things. You'd say, okay, in that situation, that would be a rational sacrifice. It's because it's aligned with my objective values. If that is true, if you do value your partner's life more than your own in that situation. But I think at some point I will have a comeback and rebut that from another angle as well, but I'll wait till I get there. So the growing tension is, at this point, that some so-called sacrifices lead to growth, increase power, advance one's life, achieve valuable objectives. And because I'm reading from my chapter hasn't explained it in such depth as I have right now. It takes it slower and it builds up. But in the video, I've just jumped right in and I've told you almost everything straight from the get-go. And so that's why when I'm just talking off the cuff, it's more advanced, but here in the chapter, it's slowly building up. So if you're switching between them, don't get confused. So with sacrifice, other sacrifices can produce bitterness, destroy integrity, leave someone feeling diminished, create suffering and great loss, kill people outright. So it's like, what's the common conceptual denominator between all those? And again, it's that exchange of value. But then, yes, you have to separate that exchange of value into those two categories of good or bad. Easy way to frame it. What's a good exchange? What's a bad exchange? As simple as it can get it. Sacrifice. What's sacrifice? It's an exchange. Well, what type of exchange? Is it a good or a bad exchange? Well, it could be a bad exchange. It could be a good exchange. Oh, okay. Now that's making sense. Because then you could go, okay, well, what kind of sacrifices could I actually make in my life? What kinds should I not? Because again, philosophy is all about how to direct your life. What kind of action you should take that's good for you. And to not do bad things which are not good for you. Okay, I'll skip through that. And so there's a conceptual mess because sacrifice appears to mean simultaneously prioritization, loss, trade, suffering, exchange, moral nobility, tragedy, self-negation all at once. It's a conceptual mess. Most of the time, with most people using that term, there's no distinction made between the higher and lower values. There's no understanding or description of losing something because no alternative exists, because some sacrifice is like the lifeboat. Well, you've got no choice. It's either you throw your family member off over the boat. Well, actually, no, that is a choice, because you could choose to do that. But moving on and destroying oneself for lesser gain. Okay, skipping through. So when it comes to sacrifice, I'm just skipping through. I'm going to read only the most crucial points. Again, it's absolutely in your best interests, objectively, to go through and read this yourself. Because I don't want to read the whole thing. It takes too long, so I'm just going to pick out the best points. So 3 elements must be always present in a sacrifice of any type. A choice must be made to gain or protect a value. A prioritization is made between competing values. What do I value more, my son's life or the favor of an entity that cannot be confirmed to exist? What do I value more, this money or that food? What do I value, picking my own career or doing what my friends told me to do? So there's that. A choice must be made to gain or protect a value. A prioritization is made between competing values. A trade is made by losing a perceived lower value in exchange for a higher value. Nothing more is required for an act to qualify structurally as a sacrifice. And so at that level, it's not about morality. It's just about a description of a value exchange involving a loss. That's what sacrifice is at that level, with no moralization. That's just the pure structure. The big package deal with sacrifice, or a conflation of multiple different concepts that should not be grouped together into one. It's like, for instance, creating a new conceptual category called gink. And the concept of gink, what I put into there, I group brooms, bamboo, toothbrushes, wireless vacuum cleaners, earbuds. And so you're probably thinking, well, hold on, why are you grouping all these different things? Brooms, hockey sticks, bamboo. You're like, what's the common denominator for a new concept called gink? How can you put all these extremely distinct concrete elements into one category? And so what I was doing, I was thinking of things that are like long and straight, like an earbud, a toothbrush, a piece of bamboo, a broomstick. It's got this kind of shape. But it's like, well, why do you need a concept called gink to denote things that are straight and long like that? A wireless vacuum cleaner, or the tube on the vacuum cleaner. It's like, why do you need that concept? You don't need that concept. It's just going to confuse you. You're mixing too many things which do not go together. You could have a pencil, a pen, a permanent marker, a crayon, chalk. They're all very similar in shape, but that's not the primary reason why they can all go into the same conceptual category of drawing equipment. That'd be a better term than that. But they all get classified together because there is a similarity between all of them that isn't just based on their looks. It's also by their function. You can draw with all of them. But the concept of gink, well, that's a pointless, purposeless concept. And that's similar to what's happened here with sacrifice. You're putting in all these different things, loss and moral heroism and duty and obligation, and for business and relation, all these different things without any clarification or separation between the rational and irrational, and not being able to describe it as that exchange of the value. And so that's why it's such a mess, and people use it in ways that are irrational, and they get taken advantage of and they get exploited. And that's why people don't fight back against tax, for instance, as much as they really should, because they don't understand the nature of what's happening to them, because they don't understand the nature of the concepts they hold in their mind. They don't understand the structure of what they're built out of, because the character you are, the ego you are, is built out of the concepts that you hold. The ideas that you hold are the building blocks. They're the brick, the mortar, the concrete, the wood, everything that makes up a house. Physically using that as an analogy to conceptually your mind, your ego. The concepts are those building blocks that determine the type of character, the type of person, the ego, the spiritual being, who you are going to be. If you've got bad concepts, you're going to be a bad character. You're going to be stupid, subjective. You're going to be taken advantage of. You're going to be inverted. You'll be supporting the evil and attacking the good. But that's not what you think you're doing. You'll be living in a fictional matrix fantasy world. It's like if you tried to build a house out of chewing gum and the wrappers and honey and broken toenails and just bad quality material. You're going to get a bad quality of house. But if you have solid, I don't know, is this good quality materials? I'm not the best one to ask on that field. But if you have good quality materials, you're going to have a good house. It's the same with your concepts. That's why it's so important. Except building a house is simple compared to building a character, building your mind, because it's so much more complicated and takes a lot longer. You can build the Burj Khalifa much quicker than you can build a good character, a good mind, a good ego with all these concepts, because it's way harder. It's a much bigger endeavor, but worth it. So, coming back to the chapter. In practice, sacrifice collapses the following four distinctions into one concept: rational prioritization without harm. Okay? A lesser value is surrendered to gain a greater value without damage to one's life, integrity, or capacity. For instance, the sacrificing a pawn to win chess, or the sacrificing troops in a video game. Or you could say, I sacrificed wealth for freedom. I used to have a successful boot camp business and I was making a reasonable amount of money. And that's when I was really invested in marketing and business and sales and team strategy. And I was on a path to make a lot of money, become very wealthy. And then lots of things happened and I ended up deciding of course you want money, everyone wants more money, but am I going to put in the effort and time to build that like a business? Or is it worth more to just have a little bit of money to live a very comfortable lifestyle as I do with just a little bit of money, but have all my time free? Just on that point, I want to show you where I am because this place is really cool. I've moved apartments and I'm in Bali, Ubud, and this is my view. I'm sitting on a balcony here, and this is I don't like the idea of the ashtray here. I don't smoke. I used to, and it was horrible. I don't anymore. A garden down here. It's a really nice spot, and like look at the design of that. They've put the water tank in its own dedicated building. Great jungle view. It's actually close to town as well, and it was raining earlier. It was a beautiful scene. I've got a kitchen out here, so just focusing on the good. Always notice the good when the good is. Basic room, air conditioners working well, inside desk. Very comfortable, and I am paying $25 a night. You won't find something like this in Australia. No, so why would I want to work and make money when I can have not much money per week and live very comfortably and have all my time to myself? But fair enough, if some people want to have lots of money, they sacrifice their time. So they don't have much free time, but they have lots of money. So it's like, okay, that's understandable. Each to their own with that kind of sacrifice. So that would be like a rational prioritization without harm. There's no harm happening there. Whereas, say, the lifeboat example, or a soldier staying behind to defend a retreat, there can be harm up to death. Or if you jump in front of a car that's coming to crash into someone you care about and you put your body in the way, you might not die, but your body is getting injured. Okay, so you have rational prioritization without harm, and then you have Well, the next one I've got written here, rational prioritization with self-harm. So real loss, injury, even death. Yeah, so basically that is just what I said. I gave those examples. Okay, good. Next, irrational prioritization. So it's a perceived gain, but a real loss of sacrificing the animal. No one's allowed to eat it. It just rots out there, but they're getting the favor of a god. Well, that's an irrational prioritization because they think they're gaining, but there's no actual gain. It's a real loss. A higher value is destroyed for a lesser or illusory value. Okay, it functions as a mechanism of self-destruction disguised as benefit. This thing, the fist into the arm with the thumb activation, tax, voting, religion, bad relationships, helping someone unworthy. Don't help people who don't deserve your help. I had a girl I met in Thailand one time, and I wanted to catch up with her again. Well, while I was still in Thailand, and then she ghosted me. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever, ignore that, all right. And that was 6 months ago. And she messages me today out of the blue after not talking to me since ghosting me. Hey, like, I need your help. Okay, what do you want? Oh, I need some money. I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I'll send you $1 million. Don't worry, is anything else you want? like, what? I'm like, you ghosted me. You don't deserve my help. Why would I help you? Why would I sacrifice my money? Because she's not going to pay it back. Why would she? It's like, no, you don't help the unworthy. Sometimes if it's a stranger and if it's in a situation where you can help, I think it's nice to help. It's good to help. For example, one time also in Thailand, Koh Samui, I think it was Koh Samui, a guy on a motorbike crashed. I've told this story before in some other video. Had a motorbike accident, and so yeah, I decided to help. But so there's no sacrifice there. That's me actually. It's not even a rational sacrifice or irrational. It was just me living in alignment with my values of doing something to help. Because I didn't know this man. Could be, the best man in the world. I don't know. It could be the worst man in the world. I don't know. But in that perspective, innocent until proven guilty. So I decided to help and do the little I could. Oh, he had a chunk missing out of his leg, just like someone had come with an ice cream scooper and just chunked out flesh from the side of his thigh. Nasty, horrible. Anyway, okay. Yeah, don't help those who are unworthy. For instance, if it's someone you know and they don't deserve your help, don't help them. Help those who deserve it, or strangers in situations, because you understand, well, if I was in that position, I'd want some stranger to help me. So that's selfish. That's acting objectively selfish. Because sacrifice does link into values, and it links into selfishness and selflessness, altruism. You have objective selfishness, subjective selfishness, but I don't need to get into that right now. That will be another dedicated video. And then you have needless sacrifice. This is a concept that almost everyone understands. So it's where loss occurs without even a credible perceived gain. There is no meaningful exchange, only waste, incompetence, nihilism, or strategic collapse. For instance, if you have Gallipoli or other World War I or II battles where it's just charging the trench lines, and the generals, everyone knows this isn't going to work. We can't win the war. And that's coming from a perspective that there should be a war. It's good guys fighting a bad guys. Okay, just pretend for a moment. And achieving victory is destroying the enemy so the good guys can win. Just coming from that perspective. Well, the goal is to win. But by sending your troops into machine gun fire without any cover, artillery, air support, tanks, mortars, just running straight at the machine guns, they're all going to die and they're not going to kill barely any of the enemy troops. That's just needless sacrifice. That's stupidity. Completely needless. And practically everyone does understand that. They'd say, they can recognize and point to that unit, that reference of the trench charge, and say, that's a needless sacrifice. Well, they'd add also the term needless, but they can see, that's a sacrifice, that's a bad sacrifice. Or the Joker burning that pile of cash. You're like, oh, dude, you're burning that money. Okay, I get it. You like chaos and you want to be evil and all this stuff, but that money is still useful to you. You could still do a lot with that money because money is an objective value. And so these are not 4 moral categories. They're 4 ways the same word is used. So because it's recognizing 4 different concrete examples that can fit under the concept of sacrifice, because they all share similarities of loss primarily, and then exchange for the top 3. Because in the needless sacrifice there is no exchange, there is only loss. There's no perceived value, nothing is gained. There is only loss. Unless the general is sending his troops to their death because he gets some kind of sick, sadistic kick out of it and he gets a gain. Okay, well, there you go. There's an exchange. But if you treat them interchangeably and you equivocate, you treat them as the same thing and you don't pull them apart and then put them into these conceptual boxes and label them like I've done, then the term sacrifice, it whitewashes the bad and it dirties the good. So meaning the irrational sacrifices get whitewashed by the rational sacrifices and vice versa. Hopefully what I said there can make sense over time. So when sacrifice is irrational, it's because people don't understand what is objectively valuable, what's actually good for them, and they don't know how to be virtuous, how to actually achieve those values. They don't know how to prioritize action, so they're failing epistemologically, metaphysically, axiologically, morally. They're failing in all these areas due to incompetence. And I'm not saying that's an insult, that's just identifying the nature of what it is, and we've all been there. You can't not of being incompetent and failing on those different areas, because until you study them and you learn them, the best you can do is achieve accidental success here and there, not by principle, but by force of will and by accident can you achieve value success in those different domains. Subjective belief does not redeem objective loss. An action can be experienced as meaningful and profitable and still be a destructive loss. It can be praised socially and still be irrational. Everyone in the world could be cheering you on to merge and be assimilated with the Ball collective to make the ultimate sacrifice. They could all be clapping and cheering. That does not make it good. That does not make it objectively valuable. That does not make it a rational sacrifice. Consensus is not a measurement of veracity, and it can be chosen sincerely while remaining morally wrong and axiologically detrimental. So again, remembering that axiology is that branch of philosophy which is based on the theory of values. What is objectively valuable or what is not? Because there's big confusion with subjective values and intrinsic values. They're the main category errors. And then axiology also includes the purpose of life, the meaning of life. What else? The prime objective. So the dual standards of success or of value of biological and psychological health and functioning. So axiology is super duper duper important. If you have an entire philosophy without axiology, you haven't got an entire philosophy. You just haven't grounded it properly, or you haven't conceptually separated it well enough. All right, moving on. The role of moral obligation. This is how sacrifice gets used as a weapon to control people. So moral obligation is not an act of specific sacrifice. It is a spoken act which functions as the delivery mechanism by which irrational sacrifice is justified, normalized, and propagated. And here sacrifice is reframed as duty. You have a duty to do this, to give to charity, to pay your tax, You have a duty to do this, to conform, to vote. It's your duty to be conscripted into the military. You have a duty to serve your parents. It also gets framed as debt. You have a debt to the world. You owe the world something. You owe your parents something. Acceptance and approval for moral obligation, moral requirement, proof of goodness, condition of belonging, the signature of love. So moral obligation. If you really loved me, you'd sacrifice. You'd give up what you really value. If someone really values their work and their work is their number one priority. I was thinking the first person I thought of was Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards from Fantastic Four, where he values, well, I think in that multi-dimensional, comic book existence or universe, multiverse, most of Reed Richards as Mr. Fantastic, the stretchy man who's really smart, he values his work of making the universe a better place more than he does his family. But I think the main universe is Reed Richards. He decides to choose his family over his work, very similar to Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty basically copied that idea, with Rick copying Mr. Fantastic because I think Mr. Fantastic came first, where they had, in Rick and Morty, it's a cool show. He's got the Citadel of Ricks, whereas, Reed Richards has that as well, where it's just all the different versions of him working in like a citadel to figure out all the different problems and create solutions for all the problems of the multiverse, where they dedicate like some entire universes just to farming. Like, it's a really cool concept. It's really cool. And that's what matters to him most. It's not to say he doesn't value his family, but he values his work more than family. But because it's a story, what happens is when he chooses his highest value of his work, then his family loses him. But it's like, well, you're with the wrong person then. You want to be with a partner who says, oh, okay, I understand your work is your highest value, but you can't just be working 24/7 realistically. You want time away from work too. You're not a robot. You're still an intelligent volitional being, not a robot. And ideally, you would want a partner that helps you and is invested in your work as well, ideally. Whether that's in a comic book or in the real world, in this dimension or any dimensions. But sometimes it can be extremely difficult to find your ideal. That's why people all the time, they settle for less, but they settle for far too less. That's why they make irrational sacrifices all the time. Oh, this girl's good enough, better get married so I don't lose her. It's like, well, is that really in your best interests? Probably not. A lot to say about that too, which I've spoken about in other videos. I don't approve of the concept of marriage whatsoever. Approve of the concept of monogamy for a long time, but not of marriage. That completely distorts and devalues the concept. Well, the experience of true love and monogamy just undermines it all. Adds a nasty smelling layer to it all. Not a fan. Anyway, coming back, that's why I brought that up, the signature of love, of sacrifice. Sacrifice, if it was Susan Storm, who is the partner of Reed Richards in coming back to comic books, you should sacrifice, Reed. Give up your work, what you value most out of everything, to be with your family. To only be with your family. It's like, why are you making me choose between them? You don't care about me. That's not love. That's control. But people think that's what real love is, sacrifice. Jesus, that's what real love is. He sacrificed his life for you. It's got nothing to do with love. Nothing to do with it at all. So this mechanism of moral obligation via sacrifice, just about control, operates by shifting attention away from value hierarchy and outcome and towards guilt, praise, and social approval. It converts irrational loss into something that feels noble, necessary, or owed. Noble? Jesus was noble doing that. The soldier who sacrificed was noble. Necessary or owed. Okay? Sacrifice names the loss. Moral obligation is the narrative that pressures others to accept or repeat that loss. 2020. Have a look at that narrative. Moral obligation. Save grandma. So there was the delivery mechanism via moral obligation propagated by the mainstream media, and then all the other sheeple walked around like that, who peer pressured others into irrationally sacrificing their dignity, their integrity, their welfare, physically and psychologically. So without this reproductive mechanism of one person spreading the idea to another, most irrational sacrifices would not persist. They need to be spread. They would be recognized as destructive and abandoned. And so the reason why rational, objective people don't talk about buying things at the supermarket, they don't classify it as a rational sacrifice, most of the time we don't think about sacrifice, is because rational people don't think in terms of loss. Most of the time we think about gain. Like, what can I gain from this? How can I gain? How can I improve? How can I become better? Sure, there is some thinking, of course, you want to think, how can I minimize losses, etc., financially or whatever. But that whole perspective of Christianity, for example, is putting loss on a pedestal and worshipping it and trying to embody and emulate it. How can I copy what Jesus did? How can I lose to theoretically gain some kind of value, some kind of social approval, or tick in the box from God to get into heaven? How can I suffer and lose to be approved of? That's not what rational people do. They don't think like that. We think in terms of values and priorities, outcomes, long-range flourishing. Okay, I say a bit more in the chapter. You can read that yourself. Okay, now I have a whole cascade of concrete examples. The first one, Abraham and Isaac, that I went over before, but it's like what I've got here. So it wasn't it's just funny to read. This was not a tragic necessity or a noble test. It was an epistemic catastrophe. This destruction of a real value for an imaginary one with Abraham. The fact that Abraham believed, even if it is just a story, character of Abraham believing, right? The fact that he believed the hierarchy was correct, hierarchy of values, because you have a pause here, you have a hierarchy of values. Some things are worth more to you than others. Some things are more valuable. My laptop is the most valuable thing that I have. That's the most invaluable thing. And then it would be my phone second, and then maybe my mouse, and etc. Say with physical things, you have that hierarchy. When it comes to freedom and wealth, some people have wealth above freedom. When it comes to love and relationships, they have different value. Some people might value their family over their partners, or their partner over their children, children over their partner, or their own aloneness and their own company over everything else. So you have a hierarchy of values, and it's good to have at least a basic understanding of your hierarchy, but it'd be ideal. Maybe I need to do that thoroughly. I've done that basically, but I'd probably do that thoroughly, where you just list out all the different values, freedom. I think I have done this. I think my prime value was either like truth or power. And power in the sense of being able to change your circumstances. Power comes in knowledge. It's not power over others. No, actually it can be. It can be power over others in the form of influence, but not in the evil domination kind. Because power is that force which enables change. Obviously, when you use that in the direction of what you want. When you learn how to change a car tire, now you have power to be independent. When you go through a pothole and your tire goes flat, well, you're not dependent and helpless and not powerful, weak, or what's the exact opposite of powerful? Powerless. It took me too long to remember that. You don't want to be powerless, but now you have that knowledge. Well, you're powerful in that context. So power, knowledge, truth, freedom, sovereignty, are like my highest values. And then everything comes underneath that, like say love, because people always, they put love on this pedestal, they put that at the top. It's like love is worth nothing if it's all a lie. So truth is objectively more valuable, because what's more valuable? Like the greatest feeling of love you can ever possibly have, but it's a lie, or the greatest feeling of love you can possibly have, but it's the truth. And if it's the truth, if it's based on a truth, it is going to be a better love. Like if you have a relationship with a woman and she's cheating behind your back and it's based on a lie, she wants your money, obviously it will affect the quality of the relationship. You might not be able to pick up on that overtly or explicitly, but it will affect the underlying dynamics. Whereas if you're with a partner and they really do love and care about you and it's all based on truth, well, which one's better? Which one's better? That's not even a question. So you want to figure out your value. I say I love freedom as well. I lived on a boat because I can move around, live in a van. I've been traveling for 3 years, moving around. I love that flexibility and movement. But some people can rationally, for sure, value that stability and predictability of having a house and lots of things and all that stuff. Yeah, that's totally fine as well. So you want to figure out what is your value hierarchy. So Abraham's was absolutely wrong. Sincerity does not convert delusion into virtue. So Jesus, any self-torture for others. Self-torture has no causal power to redeem others. This is not a sacrifice as rational prioritization, but sacrifice as mystified suffering. It survives only because moral obligation reframes destruction as holiness. The appropriate response is not reverence, but rejection and pity. Pity. Which is true. Yeah, when people, like, I fell into that Jesus trap at one point for about 6 to 8 weeks or so during November 2020, when I was moving up from Melbourne to Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia, when all that shit happened, because I had to move out of Victoria because the cops came and busted down my door with a battering ram. I just felt totally unsafe. It was just a shithole. And plus, it did actually function as a good excuse, justification to move up to Queensland because I had always wanted to anyway. So it was a lose-win. It ended up being a win, whatever. That happened. And yes, so that's what I mean. I can understand the sadness there. It's like, oh, understandable to fall into the trap, but to stay in that trap of Christianity, it's like, oh, there's a lot of pity there. That's sad. But anyway, moving on. Jumping in front of a bullet. Okay. Continuing on from when I was talking about it earlier, this was the other part I had to rebut the earlier argument. So this case is frequently romanticized. And in most real situations, what will happen? You jump in front of a bullet. That does not neutralize the threat. The bad guy, you and your partner are walking down a dark alley. Criminal comes out and he goes to shoot your girl. And you jump in front of the bullet. What's going to happen? Do you think he's only got one bullet? If he really wanted to shoot both of you for whatever reason, he's going to go, oh, okay, you're on the ground now going, fuck, I just got shot in the chest. Now I'll shoot her. Bang. It's like, well, now you're both shot. That sacrifice was for nothing. That was pointless. That was stupid. It doesn't save her. Doesn't stop him. Doesn't attack him. Doesn't do anything. It's irrational or even needless. What you could have done, or could have at least tried to do, you see him, he's going to shoot her, boom, push her out the way. Maybe it buys you a couple more seconds. He gets disorientated, he goes to re-aim on her again. Now it gives you time to run up and charge and attack, to do something, even if there is no possibility of you winning because he's 8'9" or something and he's, I don't know, Space Marine. You could do something. You're not just being, jumping in front of the bullet. That's just completely irrational. So even in the case of jumping in front of a bullet, there's no time that's a rational sacrifice, because there's other alternatives that are available to you that are more rational, such as, pushing her out the way, taking off your shoe and throwing at him, or simply running away. And that may sound harsh at first. You think, hold on, you're getting held up in a dark alley, someone's pointing a gun at your woman. Run away? But it's like, well, hold on, what else can you do? If you can, your option is you both get killed in that situation. Or, if you can try and fight somehow, okay. But if you're not a fighter and you're like, well, I'm going to die and then she's going to die anyway, it could be more rational for you to run away and go get help. and to call for help or to call the police, get someone to come and assist you right then and there, so then you could actually stop what's happening or get justice. It'd be better. I mean, this is why there's so much confusion, because people don't like talking about this, because it can get really tough when you have to make decisions. They just go, oh, just die. That's easier. That's the good thing to do. But it's like, well, hold on. Then what happens? You jump in front of the bullet, you die. Then she gets killed, he gets away, and there's no justice. And then he probably goes and kills someone else again. But at least if you can't fight, there's nothing you do, but you run, like, you're going to feel horrible about that, and maybe in a way you'd prefer to die. But if you... And so each to their own sometimes in that situation. It's like, well, what are you valuing more? Do you want to try and protect her even though it's irrational and it's not going to work, and die, but at least you die with some sense of honor of trying to protect her? Or you flee for your life and to go get help. But the thing is, you don't know if you're going to be able to get help to come and stop her from being shot or hurt or raped or something in time. You don't know if you'll be able to find help straight away, but there is a chance you might. You might walk around the corner and there's Superman, or some other a group of big burly blokes, or other people with guns, or cops or something to help in that situation. And even if there's not, worst case scenario, at least you get away, you can survive, you've seen the criminal's face, and you can try and pursue justice either through the legal system, or if you want to turn into a Batman and become your own vigilante, learn how to fight and then hunt that person down so you can get some sense of justice. I mean, it would be pretty horrible, because that would mean that he had then killed your woman and then you had to run away. But then at least you still live and you could have some kind of values, and you could have some sense of justice eventually in the end, potentially, but maybe that never happens as well. So sometimes these situations are deeper than meets the eye, and they can be quite complicated. Well, they entirely depend upon your value hierarchy. Values are objective, but there can be a personal, not subjective, but still an individual objective hierarchy of how you arrange those values. For instance, if you value dying with a sense of honor, even if it doesn't achieve anything, if you value that more than running away and then actually finding help, well, it depends on the individual. What's more rational? Well, it is more rational if all you can do is run away and go get help and actually find that help. That is more rational than just dying for your honor's sake, because oh man, you could keep talking about this for quite a while actually, but we'll skip over it. At the end of the day, I think the principle is to do the most rational thing you can in that situation, because obviously it's going to be a high adrenaline situation. You might not think of the most rational thing to do, but yeah, the principle is to be as rational as you possibly can in the context of the situation, and try to minimize loss and harm as much as possible, the best you can do. And so the life raft scenario, you've got multiple versions of this as well, because you've got the version where it's a rational sacrifice. Okay, I want all my family to go on, I'm happy to die. But then you've got another situation where it's like, well, what if they're all strangers? You go, well, do I want to die for strangers, or am I willing to throw someone overboard so then I can get a spot on that life raft? But then you think, well, if I do that, then the other 9 people might try to throw me off because they don't want me on there because I just did that. And let's say they don't do that. Well, what happens when I get back to land and I survived? And there's a court case now, and then I get found guilty and put into prison because I killed someone. Oh, okay. So you really have to think about all the consequences of that kind of situation. But then let's change it. And let's say you were in line to get on the right life raft, and then someone bumps in front of you and forcefully shoves past you and gets on in front. Well, then now maybe you do want to throw them off, and you have more of a moral right now. Okay, no, I throw them off. No, you get out. I was in line. You forced past me. No, you get out of here. So that changes the situation as well, because you go, well, I don't want to sacrifice myself. In the situation where it's your loved ones, yeah, maybe you do choose for the rational sacrifice, but you don't want to make an irrational sacrifice. You don't want to just be like, well, he pushed past me, hey, he's on the lifeboat, I'm going to go down with the Titanic. Oh, well, it's okay. Well, no, it's not. It's not okay. That's an irrational sacrifice. So, but it really depends on the situation if you're willing to fight to survive. What you're going to do in the interest for your continued existence. You know, like, do you really want to die by drowning? Ugh. And then you also have, well, if there's 10 people who are already on the life raft, but you know they're bad people. If you know they're scum, measuring by whatever metric. And then you say, you know, I don't even need to think about this. I'm fucking throwing one of you people over. Get out. I know, you're a bad guy. And then it's like, well, okay. So it really depends on the situation. And then you have sacrifice framed in regards to war and nationalism, patriotism, dying for one's country. It links in with conscription, duty, honor, you know, pseudo honor, not real honor. So, yeah, that's all going to be irrational sacrifices. I mean, sure, you could join the army because it is aligned with your values, or the Navy, Air Force, Marines. I joined the army. I wasn't doing it out of duty or out of standard indoctrination to my country. It's because I wanted. I was a very violent warmonger in that respect, and that's why I joined. And then I didn't stay very long. Oh, well, no, actually, I did stay for a long time, 3 years. Too long. Too long. I've spoken about that in previous videos. Yeah, horrible. I could make a whole video about that, actually, but not for right now. But then you have a rational situation where people are in the military, and there is, let's say, a legitimate war, where a good country is defending itself from a bad country, theoretically, and you have a general who is going to sacrifice his troops, but it's a rational sacrifice. So say, for instance, he's got his army. His army is in position and they're holding a line, but there's an advancing enemy which outnumbers them 3-1, and they're going to encircle them. And so the general says, well, this isn't a good position. We need to retreat. But if we all retreat at once, we're going to start getting slaughtered. So what he needs is a company to stay back. Let's say there's 3,000 men in his army. He needs at least 100 or 300 of them to cover the retreat. And he knows they're going to get overwhelmed. So he's going to sacrifice the 300 to save the 3,000. And so there's two ways he could do it. By getting volunteers and saying, we need to do this, otherwise we're all going to die here. We need to get back to a bigger army. We need to get to a better, more defendable location. We need to retreat because there's an advancing army, we're going to die. And so he tells his troops the truth, and then he asks for volunteers. And they are going to then be rationally sacrificed in the interest of everyone else. Because already in that situation, when you're in the army, you have volunteered to fight and die. So it makes more sense. They're not random strangers. They're people who already know, I'm in the army, I'm at war, like I'm probably going to die here, especially if you're in a war. And so they'd be willing to do stuff like that, to make a rational sacrifice. Because, well, because they're always thinking as well, maybe we do survive, maybe we will be able to win. Or maybe they're also thinking, well, we can hold that line and then we can retreat ourselves. We can get everyone out and then hopefully we can have enough time, because they're not thinking we're going to die absolutely. There's always some hope to keep them going most of the time. That's the first way, and that I think would be the right way to do it. The second way is he doesn't say what's happening and he lies, or he omits the truth. And he says, okay, the main force is retreating. The company, it'd probably be, I can't remember how many people are in a company. Let's say 100, and so there's 3 companies there, 300, 10% of the army. And he says, hold this line here for the time being. The main force is doing a retreat, and then you're going to follow us. And then once the main force has retreated, and then, it's like, oh shit, okay, you guys, you've got to hold the enemy advances at bay. And so they're getting sacrificed, but they didn't volunteer for that specifically. They don't know what's happening. They're just caught in that predicament. And sometimes you might need to do that, but they're soldiers, soul dyers, they're warriors. They joined up with full knowledge to do that. So I think it's always best to tell your troops the truth and to have them, if they're going to be sacrificed, at least they know they're being sacrificed. So, but still, in both instances, it still is a rational sacrifice. Because if the general didn't do that, the whole army gets wiped out, and with going with that's what would have happened. They're outnumbered 10 or 100 to 1 or something, not just 3 to 1. They're done for. So instead of having them all die, only 10% of them die, while also putting some kind of death toll on the enemy. Another point to show you about the equivocation, the conflation, the package deal, the concept of sacrifice is a broken concept as well. If you watch my videos on the ego, I introduce the idea of broken concept, anti-concept, equivocation, false equivalences, etc. In both examples of that rational sacrifice with the general saving 90% of his troops, as also compared to the irrational general sending his troops to die at the trench lines. That is needless sacrifice, completely irrational. But both get called just sacrifice. Most people never make that distinction between needless or rational, irrational, objective, subjective. They just say sacrifice. They're both sacrifice. Well, that's not good enough. That's what creates all this confusion. If you can't tell the bad from the good from the bad, you're going to think the bad is the good and the good is the bad. You're going to make mistakes, which is not good for you or others. Another one is parents and guilt. Here's another example. Oh, I hate hearing this. You hear this from parents, and parents say to their kids, especially when their kids are misbehaving and they don't know how to be a parent because they don't give a shit about being a good parent. Like, how can you not study being a parent before you have kids? Like reading all the books you can find, asking everyone you can, going to classes, people just pop them out like it's no big deal. Like they're taking a crap. Oh, it's just having a kid. It's only bringing a new life form into this world. They take it so unseriously. They think it's a joke. And whenever the child misbehaves and they don't know how to deal with it, they start trying to guilt trip the child into behaving through that moral obligation. I sacrificed everything for you. After all I've given up, and you treat me like this. It's just horrible to hear that. It's like, one, learn how to be a good parent. You should have studied that beforehand. And let's say in the very rare cases, if there are any at all, even one, where a parent did do everything to become a good mum or dad before they had the child, and also while they're still raising their children, if they're doing everything they can, and then the child is still misbehaving, and then they're like, I don't know what else to do, I'm going to try using a guilt trip to get my child to behave. Okay, I can see that as understandable because you're desperate, you're emotional, you've tried to do everything within your power to discipline your child and have them act rationally as they can as a child. But most of the time it's not like that, is it? No. It's just guilt tripping to control because the parent is too lazy to invest the time and energy and money into learning how to be a good quality parent. They just don't care. They don't care. If they did care, they'd learn this, especially in today's day and age when the information is readily available. And so it's used as leverage to influence and control the child, get to them to change their future choices. And it's not an expression of love or care to do that. It's manipulation. It's used as a guilty weapon, control, put them into obedience, subjugation. It's an insult as well. One doesn't complain about sacrificing $10 on a stock to get a 10x return. Someone doesn't complain and say this was a sacrifice to spend the $50 to get the food. They don't say this is a sacrifice. This is terrible. And so my point there is to say to your child, after everything I've sacrificed, do you know how much I sacrificed to raise you? Like what that's saying is, that's coming from the framework of, look at all the things I would have preferred to have in my life. Look at everything I've given up that I really wanted to have you. I gave up the dream of the life I wish I had for this, for being your parent. What kind of impact is that going to have on a child's mind? That's a horrible thing to say to your parent. If a mother or father whines about sacrifice, they do not deserve praise, support, or submission. They need to reevaluate their epistemology and axiology to correct their mistake and to prevent similar mistakes. They made an irrational prioritization when they chose to have that child, and they must live honestly with the consequences of their short-sightedness. You can't just take the child back to the shop. You can't sell them. You can put them up for adoption, but it's a much more serious thing. The child didn't choose to be born, from one perspective. Maybe in another perspective of pre-birth memories and all that kind of stuff, perhaps. But anyway, the parents made that joint choice and must bear all the responsibility. It is not the child's fault if the parents are unprepared to be parents. That is their own foolish and completely avoidable error. The burden is on the parents always, and to weaponize sacrifice against their children is a terrible immorality. Again, with bad relationships, staying in a wrong relationship isn't good for you. Don't sacrifice. There's a big difference between sacrifice and compromise. If you're lying in bed with your girl and you're like, well, what movie should we watch? And I want to watch Avengers Infinity War. And she says, no, I want to watch Avengers Endgame. You're like, well, how about we watch Avengers Age of Ultron instead? And she says, let's watch that. And so you make a compromise. So there's no sacrifice there. It's not like she's saying, hey, I want to watch Titanic, and you're like, I really don't want to watch the Titanic, but okay, I'll do it to make you happy. That's a sacrifice. No, a compromise is where you're still doing what you want to do, but it's not your number one. Like, I really wanted to watch Infinity War. She wanted to watch Endgame. I didn't want to watch that because I watched it last week or whatever. You make the compromise on something that suits both of you. That's fine in a relationship. Sacrifice is not. So the function of sacrifice as an anti-concept, I'll whiz through this. You start with real harm, step 1. I'm showing how the anti-concept works mechanically. It's going to be best, again, if you read through this yourself. It'll make more sense. So real harm, there's coercion, energy, time, money is taken, they're exploited. And then step 2 is to rename that exploitation as sacrifice. So tax is the best example. So instead of saying you are being exploited with taxation, or this, whatever, you are making a sacrifice. So they try to reframe conceptually something that is a terrible loss and that should not happen, you shouldn't choose and you don't want, and which is a crime, and they rename it as some kind of dutiful, noble sacrifice. They say it's a good thing. Give up everything for Jesus. It's good. And then step 3, they moralize that loss. So they rename it as a sacrifice, and then they say it's a good thing. And then step 4, the language of sacrifice implies goodness, choice, authorship, and this masks the fact that the loss is imposed by threat, alternatives are blocked, consent is fictional, and so what they do is they're basically making exploitation no longer look like exploitation, it looks like virtue signaling, all that stuff. Oh, I paid a lot of tax this year, I'm a great person. It's like, you got exploited, you bloody idiot. You got manipulated and deceived and forced via threat of death and worse, imprisonment, to hand over all this money, and now you're looking at it as some kind of moral goodness and a virtue. Look how much I paid $100,000 tax this year, I'm a good person. Oh my goodness. They're framing a crime as some kind of virtue. So bad. Okay, I'm going to skip that part. Tax, okay. So people fail to recognize that exploitation because it blocks the correct concept. So because exploitation gets covered up conceptually with the word sacrifice, same with coercion, predation, irrational loss, theft. They're all the negative versions of sacrifice. and then it supplies a counterfeit moral explanation: sacrifice, duty, virtue, obligation. And so the victim is left unable to name what's happening to them. They're unable to object with a rational argument. They can't even think clearly about their own degradation. That's entrained ignorance via conceptual sabotage. So most of the time, sacrifice is just not going to be in your interest. It's going to be irrational, subjective. Again, subjective, based on values that are not really valuable. As in, people subjectively think social approval from strangers is a value. No, that's not valuable. Your integrity, your dignity, your physical health, your mental health, they are objectively valuable. Whether a stranger looks at you really nastily or smiles at you, you can only see the smile behind their eyes because they're wearing the mask, and you're either wearing the mask or you're not wearing the mask. Like, getting social approval for wearing a mask in public, that is not an objective value. That's a subjective value. And when I say that's a subjective value, I mean it's not a value. It's not valuable. People believe it is valuable, but they subjectively believe based upon a value hierarchy which isn't axiologically grounded and anchored in proper survival, with the dual standards of biological, bodily, and psychological, mental, spiritual, mind, health, and functioning. If something doesn't promote your health in body and mind, or your functioning in body and mind, it's not good for you. It's not a value. You shouldn't be making a sacrifice if it is compromising your health and function of your body and mind. Say it again and again and again. The dual standard of axiology, get this into your head. Get it into my head too through repetition. So I've made a lot of this stuff up, but it's good to talk about it, so it really reinforces it. And as I speak it and I talk about it, I'm like, damn, what I'm talking about is actually true. Because you can write it out, you spend a lot of time thinking, and in the moment you're like, oh, I can see the sense of that. But the more you start to talk about it, the more you integrate and you can understand and connect abstractions to concretes. You go, oh, I'm not making stuff up. I really am being objective. Like, this is the truth. That's what's valuable. Oh, yeah. It's like, it was never my intention to make anything. I didn't think I was making anything up, but when you talk about it, you're like, oh, you put it into practice. Like, oh, it actually is true. It's so good. Yeah. Sacrifice is used subjectively. It sanctifies self-destruction. It legitimizes coercion. It rewards inverted value hierarchies. It trains people to feel noble for harming themselves. It indoctrinates people to willingly give up what is good for them. It programs people to normalize and even revere unjustifiable loss. Just get reincarnated. Have your memory wiped. Just one more time. Just one more time. You've got a mission down on Earth. The world isn't the same without you. That's how special and important you are. just one more memory wipe. This is only the 600,000th time you're going down. It's okay. Just one more time, we promise. And then you'll get to go to heaven with Jesus. Come just one more time. Just say, make the sacrifice. It's for the greater good. You'll get a high score. You got to laugh at it. A rational person does not ask, what must I sacrifice? They ask, what is worth pursuing? What is valuable and what is not? What can I gain? What can I win here? How can I benefit? Closing integration. All meaningful action is guided by values. All values require prioritization. Loss is sometimes unavoidable. But loss does not become good by being named. And suffering does not become virtuous by being praised. Once sacrifice is stripped of mysticism, obligation, and moral theatre, what remains is simple. Gain matters, hierarchy matters, reality matters. Anything that demands your destruction for a lesser end is not noble. It's irrational. And no amount of praise or propaganda can change that. As I said, go read the full chapter as well. You'll get even more value out of it reading it for yourself. Hope you enjoyed the video, and now at the end of this approximately an hour and a half video, you have a much better understanding of sacrifice, and you're able to classify rational objective sacrifice, which is an exchange of a lesser value for a higher value. So you're giving up something which doesn't matter to you too much in exchange to get something which is more important to you, which again doesn't happen too often. And then you have the irrational, subjective, bad sacrifice, which the bad guys of this world want you to normalize and think is good. They want you to think it's this side, rational and objective, but it's not, because it's that exchange of something you really want, something that's really important to you, in exchange for something that you don't really care about, that isn't really important to you. So I hope you've learned a lot and this makes more sense. If it does, let me know. I'd like to hear. Bye.